Okay, so thank you very much. I want to say welcome to all of you. So maybe we'll begin with Mangalacharyan, and then we'll speak a little bit about what we're going to be doing today, and hopefully what we're going to be discussing or working on over the next few sessions as well. In relation to this book, a bit of a shameless plug here, but we have a new cover. I do emphasize new cover of Leadership for an Age of Higher Consciousness Part 2 by Bhuta Swami, which is also available on Amazon. And so people around the world can also access the books and get as many copies as they'd like. And what we're going to be looking at will be basically a study. What I really want to do with this book is try to do a bit of a study where we really go into it in a bit more depth, try to understand more about leadership, have some dynamic questions and answers about it. We can see how we stack up, because everyone's a leader, where there are opportunities for us to also to improve. And I'm thinking about a conversation I had with some devotees recently. We can also think about leadership in general, where they're strong, where they can improve, etc. That'll be an interesting conversation. But we'll start with Mangalacharyan and then we'll go from there. So what we're going to be doing over the next few sessions, there'll be many dimensions to it. It's going to be practical because, and we'll do this more in future sessions, we're going to give you various opportunities to evaluate yourself against the knowledge. It will also be very introspective because my inclination, and it's a negotiation, if it doesn't work, we can change it. My inclination with this book is to really try and go through it and really start to take it bit by bit, okay? So I'm playing with the idea that in future sessions, we may do more summary, right? So this is chapter, these are the key points, etc. But I thought, at least today, we'll read and we'll explore, because the way that this book has been written by Bhakti Maharaj and the way he writes in general is quite dense. You can take one or two sentences and there's a lot there. And what I'm finding is that when we can unpack some of these things, we get a lot more realization, but more importantly, to be very honest with you, more important than having more realization is more transformation. The hope is that as leaders, if we understand this, if we churn this knowledge, it can really help us in our lives, because we're all leading our own lives. We're all the CEO of our own life, of our own existence. And that involves many things. It involves decisions around time. It involves decisions around who we associate with, decisions around how we associate. There are decisions around the qualities that we develop. I was having a very, in some ways, groundbreaking experience with one devotee. What we were basically doing was we were trying to use certain means to figure out what are the key things that we need to learn in this particular lifetime. So there's a statement, Chandamali Maharaj mentioned this in the class, that Prabhupada said once that the reason why an individual doesn't go back to Godhead, or the reason why we did not go back to God in the previous life, whatever test we didn't pass, that same test will come again in this life. And one of the things I feel that my spiritual master is inspiring in the heart is this idea of being proactive, which is one of the qualities of leadership. The idea is that rather than wait till a situation occurs, rather than waiting for a crisis or whatever, instead, we go looking for the issue. We go looking, what is it, why didn't I go back? What stopped me? What are some of the characteristics that are slowing me down? Or what is the loop, right? The loop, by the loop, I mean, what is the recurring circumstance, right? We've all seen that. We may have recurring circumstances around certain types of people, recurring circumstances against certain types of situations, recurring circumstances in terms of even certain kinds of internal challenges. And usually there's a link between all of them, right? So it could be that one person, they attract people who always want to tell them what to do and dominate them. And in this lifetime, in order for them to pass that test, they have to also become stronger, right? So the external situation relates to something I need to change within myself in order to move through that particular situation. And we were doing a seminar on trust building yesterday it was a mentorship group for one guru. And we were explaining this point that actually Krishna's very kind. So what I've seen in my own life, and I think many of you will have experienced this, he gives you plenty of time. It's like, dude, work on this. We're not giving you a test right now. The test may come a year, 2 years, 6 months down the line, but look, work on this now. What usually happens is we ignore it because, it's okay. Nothing, there's no pending issue. So it's blipping on the radar. If we're introspective, especially, if we're introspective, it blips on the radar. It's like, you could work on this. If you really look at yourself, you can see, this is something I could become better at or develop. But we don't take it so seriously. Then what happens is a situation occurs which forces us to take it seriously. So I'm doing a Wisdom Wednesday program this coming Wednesday, and it's called The Story of You. And it's using this framework. The framework has many different names. Sometimes it's called the hero's journey, but the key idea is that actually there are certain stages that happen in all of our lives, right? And that same framework that they use in the hero's journey, it's used in every major successful Hollywood movie, right? It's just always there. And it's this idea that you have the individual, let's say the hero. So many things are there often, and I definitely experienced it. I was looking at this model with myself and I thought it completely fits. I remember when I was young, I started a school newspaper. It was called the GM Ace, the George Mitchell Ace. So I'd stay in during the lunch period, and we had, computers were new at the time, right? This is how old it is, right? So computers were new at the time, and I made this newspaper, and we started distributing it around the school. And I was called in to see 2 of my teachers during the dinner break. And they sat down and they told, I won't go into all the details, but they sat down and they said to me, Eddie, I think that's what they called me, Eddie. And they said, it's good you're doing the newspaper. We noticed X, Y, and Z. It's good for you just to make sure that you're on top of this, this, and this. And it's so interesting because my spiritual master, what I was told by the teachers when I was in school, this was in secondary school, my spiritual master told me the same thing in 2004. He had just come to Detroit. This was summer of 2004. I was in the car with 2 of my god sisters, Jambavati and Brajalila, and Ekavir, my spiritual master, and myself. And they were trying to tell me what to do. And my spiritual master gave me an instruction. Basically, don't let that go on, right? Basically, without going into all the details. But it was just so interesting that in the model, you'll have a mentor who tells you something that you need to hear early. And that mentor acts as a voice of Krishna. Then what happens is often we don't really take it too much to heart. Then what happens, you hit a certain challenge in life. And in order to overcome the challenge, you have to transform. So the challenge is like this, it's like a barrier, and the transformation, well, this is us before the challenge. So the challenge is here, we're here, you can't get over the challenge. But in order to actually get over the challenge, you have to make a transformation. The transformation brings you to this level. And then at this level, you can overcome that particular challenge. And I'm bringing this up because it very much links to this idea of leadership. It very much links to this idea of being proactive. This idea of not just taking account of what's happening now, but also having an eye on the present and an anticipation, and not even an anticipation, an intention as to where you should be going, okay? And I use that word should very specifically. Some courses will tell you where do you want to go, right? Some courses won't even talk about the future at all. And this, if we're taking it from the Vaishnava perspective, it works on the basis that we are instruments of a higher power. And we have a journey, we have an evolution. So we can talk about where we want to go, and there's always some room. Just like when you're driving down the road, it's a broad road, but at the same time, it's also going in a particular direction. So there's room to maneuver within your particular journey. So you have both free will, room to maneuver, room to be creative, room to express yourself personally, and at the same time, there's a distinct direction that you should be moving in. I was making a post about this for Instagram, and we were saying that the sign of intelligence is the ability to be aware of and learn the lessons that we're meant to learn in life before the test appears. Yeah? And I really mean that. Many people with this period of coronavirus, certain things weren't in place. When the situation hit, bang, it was a big shock. Other people, there were certain things in place. When the situation hit, it was not a challenge at all. So I encourage all of us, try to do that introspection. Try to consider in your own life, in terms of leading your own life, where are the recurring patterns? Right? And also, if you introspect honestly, what is it that we need to change within ourselves? For some people, it's about integrity. Right? For someone else, it's about being more responsible. For someone else, it could be taking life into their own hands, being more proactive and taking initiative. Whatever it is. I know one devotee, I won't mention who that person is, but they found out that in this lifetime, there was a few things that they had to learn. But one of them was to accept reality, because they tend to be a bit sentimental, right? So, it'll be like this, like that. And one of the key lessons for them, and it's amazing, by the way, because when you learn these key lessons, you really take off, because the lessons are fundamental. So when you learn a fundamental level, it gives you great benefit, right? Because some lessons are principles, they're really fundamental, and some are just like a side points. Doesn't make a big deal. But if you learn the key lessons, you suddenly find that everything else works, and Krishna is compassion. Therefore, again and again, you will see, we're given plenty of time. If we choose to step back, introspect, and try to understand, what am I actually, where's the weakness, right? Bhuta Bhavana, look in the mirror, you're strong here, this is where you need to spend more attention. We usually like to play with the strengths, and there's a value in that. You want to leverage that, but the fatal flaws really do need to be looked at. If we're prepared to do that work, there's so many different things that we can do to build that fatal flaw into a strength, whether it's association, whether it's being conscious, because the moment you have a habit which isn't good and you're aware of it, it starts to give you more conscious control, because you can catch yourself in the moment, oh, I'm doing this again. Anyway, there's another technique I came across, but we may touch upon that in a future session. So what I'd like to do in this session with the reading is we'll read from the Leadership for an Age of Higher Consciousness. We're going to take it bit by bit. And it's, again, deliberate. The idea here is that we try to really digest it so we change. Okay? By digesting it, we mean hearing it, reflecting upon it, seeing how we can apply it so that we get Vigyan. Right? Vigyan, the word Vi, it's an intensifier. So Gyan means knowledge. Vigyan means the knowledge is intensified. Intensified to the point that you fully experience it with your entire being, and it becomes part of us. Okay, it becomes almost intuitive, or sometimes the word that's used is second nature. Yeah, like that. Okay, let's get straight into it, and then we'll have some discussion as we go along, and that includes those who are on the Zoom. So feel free to come in with any comments as well, to also ask questions as we go along. I'm not going to read the actual foreword by Ken Shelton, because it's by Ken Shelton. So we're going to go straight to the actual preface, which is by Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, and then the introduction. And I was thinking, as I was looking at this, we'll be lucky. We may finish the preface and the introduction today, because it's quite short. We'll just explore it. And then again, as I said, when we go through the chapters, I'll figure out how we want to do that. And you can also give me some input, whether you prefer an overview or if we read and actually kind of take it in that direction. Okay, there's a lot here actually. So in future, if you want to bring pen and paper, anything like that, you're more than welcome. Because as I was looking at this, I thought there's so much to discuss. Okay, I'll read the first paragraph. This book discusses leadership in a distinctive way. It explains how to, quote unquote, be in charge, to rule or to lead with the mass of people in mind. The method presented in this book seeks to train leaders as if people mattered. In short, it espouses servant leadership, a phenomenon that allows a leader to see his or her identification with those whom they lead. It teaches how to be a servant and a leader at the same time. Now I'm going to bring out the first point that really stood out to me when I first saw this. Allows a leader to see his or her identification with those whom they lead. What do you understand by that sentence? The leader identifies with those whom he or she leads. Thoughts? And that includes those who are online. If you want to share anything, you can unmute and just do so. Okay. So it could be a sense of, yes, someone who needs help. Okay. Any other thoughts? When the leader identifies with those whom they lead.
There's a connection. There's a subtle or not so. It's not physical. It's not visible, but they identify with it, so they understand there's something intrinsic there.
Yeah. It's especially the idea that actually what I'm doing to the people who I'm leading is what I'm doing to myself. If I identify the people that I'm serving, then it's actually it's very subtle statement, but there's a lot there. If I identify with my constituents, it becomes very difficult to do anything negative to them, because it's as if I was doing something against my very self. And that kind of mentality, see, generally you won't even hear that. No one's going to say that you lead and you identify with the people that you lead. But that mindset, and that is a mindset, if people cultivate that mindset, it immediately changes the paradigm in terms of leadership. I guess one example, and Bishandev will talk about this a bit later on, is just like a mother with the children. The child is like an extension of the mother, right? So how they're treating their children, if it's a good mother, a good parent, is also very much a symbiotic experience, because what I'm giving to them, they are literally an expansion of myself. So good leadership, it rests on this idea that actually I and my constituents, we're all one, in the sense that they're all specific individuals, but they feel just as I feel, they have needs just as I have needs. And very powerful is the point that if I look after them, considering that they're non-different to me, I'm going to care for them properly. And in a sense, they are non-different. Because what I'm doing to the people that I'm leading is what I'm preparing to experience myself. So the first thing is this underlying paradigm that a good leader, let's be very clear, a good leader identifies him or herself with the people that they are leading. It's not one rule for me, another rule for someone else. And we see this also in Prabhupada's leadership, right? This is a natural state. The reason why I wanted to study this particular book on leadership is because when Bishandev is explaining how to lead, which we'll go into as we go through this book, these are eternal laws. You can literally, and I really mean this, you can literally evaluate yourself or any other leader against these principles, and that will give you an accurate understanding of how strong they are as a leader, right? Because it brings it down to the essential principles that make any leadership work. And where you see people who, there's two dimensions, I call it the vertical dimension and the horizontal dimension. When you see someone who, so let's say the vertical, they tick all those boxes, so the vertical dimensions, and B, horizontal, that means they do it consistently, right, to a high degree. So consistency and also comprehensiveness. So someone who ticks all those boxes as a leader and they do it consistently and appropriately, it's a guarantee that it will have an influence upon people. Now, there's a further point. The influence it has is also mediated by the quality of the people that they're leading. The more qualified the followers are, the more a good leader will actually be able to bring out even more. See, the less qualified the followers are, the leader will pull them up, but because they're less qualified, it's like if you pull up, if something is at -5 and you pull it up 5 points, it goes to 0. If it was at 0 already and you pull up 5 points, it goes to +5. You see the point? So it takes people from where they are and brings them to a higher level. Yeah. So there's two things. What that implies is that if you want to do great things as a leader, you want to have two things. You yourself want to be consistent, and you try to do it in good association with quality people. right? That's what all businesses are looking for. All businesses, you see, they're careful about who they hire, and then it's like, okay, you hire good people and you're a good leader, then you get optimal results. If you're a good leader and you hire bad people, okay, you can get something, but it's going to be a lot more work, right? If you're a bad leader and you have good people, again, it's not optimal. But that combination is magic. Yeah. And if we take it to the level of our own life, it's the same thing. If you lead your life well and you do it in good association, you can do anything. You can become successful in anything. You'll see that in most people's lives, it's so crazy. They're held back. Even good people, Hare Krishna, please come. Even good people, they're held back by bad association. If you're good and you're in bad association, what will happen is you'll spend all your time and energy, and not just physical energy, by the way, mental energy, having to think through and navigate around people who are draining, you see? But if you have that same energy, that same time, that same capacity with people who are positive, my Guru Maharaj would say this in seminars. He talks about the symbiotic effect and the synergistic effect. So he explained two things. One is the synergistic effect is that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So whatever every person brings, if they're good and they're together, you get even more than just adding up each person's individual capability. That's synergy. And he explained that the symbiotic effect means that it takes less work to do anything, right? So if I try to lift up a piano by myself, it's a lot of work. Two of us lifting up the same piano is less than half the effort for each of us. Does that make some sense? Yeah, so this is really powerful. So that's the first point about this idea of great leadership means to identify with the people that you're leading, right? And the beauty about the Vedic teachings is they can give you the information at the level of the principle, because you can have all these other details, be nice to them, look after them, ask them how they are, great. But if you identify with them, that automatically inspires these other things. Make some sense? Okay, let's read on. While such concepts have been beaten into the ground, this is an interesting one, as it were, this book proposes something new, something that augments existing leadership techniques, even those that are progressive and quote unquote spiritual. Many prominent principle-centered leaders are tired of talking or writing about spirituality in the workplace, and now they want to see it more actualized. They want to move beyond outdated conceptions of servant leadership or empty slogans such as managing as if people mattered, empowering people in the workplace, etc. These are well-intentioned first steps, but are still generally operating on old paradigms. I'm going to go to the next paragraph because Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj will now explain a different paradigm, which is subtle but very significant. So he then writes the following. This is so because these systems of management normally still seek to use people for mundane results or to satisfy the lesser goals of would-be managers and or their dependents. Such CEOs and leaders of corporations may resemble actual servant leaders, as the term is commonly understood, but they are usually opportunistic businessmen who by good fortune or other endeavors manage to secure a position that they often do not deserve. In the same way that politicians often use God's name to bolster their efforts and to pursue their personal agenda, while actually having little or no interest in God consciousness, most contemporary leaders speak of progressive conceptions of leadership and spirituality merely to win adherents and supporters. Their primary concern is continually how to use people to make things happen, and this is a key point, rather than making things happen for the people. Okay, and this is that last sentence here is very significant. So the idea is not we'll be nice to people so that they'll do stuff for us. The idea here is actually this real servant leadership is we're leading with the people as the goal. Okay, as the most important outcome of our leadership is what does it do to the people? What does it do for the people? You understand the point? Yeah, and I'll say this, being someone who works in that field, there's so much about leading, treat people nicely, they'll be more productive, all this kind of stuff. This is slightly different. It sounds similar, but it's a shift in a different direction. It's not that the productivity of the person is the end point. Their development is the end point. Now, of course, that doesn't exclude external productivity. It doesn't exclude them also being able to help other people to grow, etc., etc. But it's the person that's the marker of success. What has happened to your team? What has happened to the people that your team are serving? That's your index. If you get buildings and money and the team are really burnt out, there's a high turnover, people are fried, you're a failure. But if the people are flourishing, if they're able to also reach out and do good service for other people, if those people grow and develop, if they're inspired, if they actualize their full potential, if even they are able to then go and then start something new and develop that, then you're successful. Because anyway, we'll come to that a bit later on, but Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj will also speak about how good leaders make other leaders. And that's the idea. There's a way of leading which basically makes people dependent. I'm sure many of us have seen that, right? Where it's kind of like, yeah, you give them something, but you just make sure that they understand that they have to stay under you, and you feel threatened if they actually blossom on their own, right? And that's actually another thing that comes with many leaders, is that we as leaders need to be working on ourselves. If you're insecure, it's what you are as a leader is going to affect what you do to the people that you're leading. To the extent that we have insecurities, negativities that we don't work on, to that extent we will actually feel subtly, and it will happen subtly or in a gross way, right? Is that will cause us to try to, in some ways, hold others back, because we will see them as a threat to our authority and our position. Make some sense? Okay. Are there any questions on anything we read so far? If not, we will read on. Okay. Next paragraph. Our discussion of servant leadership goes beyond these superficial approaches. It is, however, extremely complex and broad-based. And unless one is serious about understanding it as it is, one would do well to put this book down right now. What you will read here includes expressions of servant leadership on both elementary and mature platforms, from introductory concepts to subtle nuances of developed theory. Our basic thesis is that true and mature servant leadership is impossible without embracing a deeply developed form of universal spirituality. This is so because the mature spiritual leader is a natural philosopher and spiritualist. These highly evolved components are as fundamental to his or her way of being as food is to any other living organism. I'm going to pause there on that. Any reflections, anything that stood out to you from that particular point, that particular paragraph? Because if not, I will just touch upon this same idea, which is that the idea of being a spiritual person means that we're practicing learning to serve. Okay. I was at Soho Street before I came here, and I was speaking to one devotee who he's going to get married, he's going to move into a different space in his life. And what we were telling him is that you have to learn to become a servant, because when you're married, you'll be serving your wife, you'll be serving your children, etc. And the whole idea of the previous ashram is that you develop the skills necessary. Hare Krishna, thank you for coming. Is that you develop the skills necessary for the next ashram. You see? So if I've learned to become a servant who takes joy in helping other people to grow, then if I'm married and have children, it's easier, because it's not something that happens overnight, that you suddenly become this selfless person. It's a practice, and there are degrees of selflessness. Now, of course, this is another key thing which I wasn't always so conscious of, but that selflessness also is empowered and founded upon self-care. Because if you don't have capacity, you cannot give. So it's very important that with the selflessness, there's also self-care. There's also the process of rejuvenating myself on all levels, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. It means I've got something in the tank, therefore I can give. Make sense? Okay, so this is the idea. And so along with serving, is the idea also of growing. When we talk about Krishna consciousness, or let's say any bona fide universal process of spirituality, it's a process of growth and development. It's a process in some ways of healing. I'm looking at myself, where am I strong? Okay, how do I leverage that? Where are there challenges? Okay, what can I do about that particular challenge? And the more that I am in a let's say, higher state of consciousness, automatically, the more that I'm able to bring to other people. Okay, so it's not a sentiment. It's not like, it doesn't matter how I am, everyone's going to be fine. No, actually, what you are is going to have a huge effect upon what you're able to give other people. So again, a leader who doesn't work on themselves, him or herself, what they're actually saying is, I don't care enough about the other people to actually build more so I can give more. The two things are automatically connected. Okay, I'll read on. A true servant leader assesses the primary needs of his dependents and compassionately serves them. I'm going to stop even just here. There's a difference between people's needs and their wants. There's actually a table. So we were using this when we were explaining to some people in a previous class, actually. We'll actually get to that when we come to that particular part of the book. But there's a list of needs and a list of wants. So what's actually really understood is that for most people, we don't really take care of our needs. Your needs, which are fundamental, human, healthy, that's the mode of goodness. Wants, that's more passion or ignorance, right? So when I know what the needs are and I take care of the needs, it also correlates to this ability of taking or building the capacity physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. On the spiritual level, there's a need for sadhana. There's a need for sadhana in terms of chanting, in terms of hearing, in terms of reading. Okay. When it comes to the emotional, social, there's a need for a sangha. Not just sangha, actually. Right? Who's ever been in sangha that they felt drained? Be honest. Anyone had that experience? Yeah, I've definitely had that experience. So you can have different types of sangha. Some sangha will actually energize you. You'll leave there feeling like, wow, I can take on the world. Some sangha may actually be more draining. Now, if it's draining because the actual quality isn't good, then we either try to raise the standard or we try to find more enlivening association. But the idea in every case is that our life is very, very short. So whatever you do, try to make sure that what you do, make it count. Right? Time is the investment. What we do that time, if you make it count, it'll be a great service, not just for you, it'll be a great service for everyone else. Because they will see an example of someone who's wise in how they use their time. They'll see the effect of that, and that will be an inspiration for them to also follow suit. That doesn't mean that we don't have recreation, by the way. Okay, because recreation is also part of using your time effectively. So activity and then recharge, activity and then recharge. Yeah? Both things come together. Okay, a true servant leader assesses the primary needs of his dependents and compassionately serves them. For this to occur, the servant leader must have a profound understanding of the highest good, which necessarily goes beyond mere material requirements. Ultimately, a servant leader focuses on our identity as spiritual beings, as people who undergo material experiences, even though at their very core, they are beyond matter. Thus, the mature servant leader must assist in servicing the soul, the real identity of each and every individual. It is the soul that is the highest expression of humanity, and mature servant leadership has little meaning without recognition of this. Okay, so it just brings in straight away this idea that spirituality is inherent to great leadership. It's not something that you can actually strip away. If you're talking about leadership at the highest level, because you're talking about serving the real self, facilitating that in some way, shape, or form to whatever degree that you can. And that means bringing in this understanding of spirituality and understanding that people have spiritual needs along with all these other levels. And if that's not at least made available in some way, we're not helping the people as much as we possibly could. Okay. let me pause here. I'm conscious that the way that the book is written, there's so much there. So what I'm going to ask you to do is take a moment to churn this. You can just do it with someone that you're sitting next to, okay? What has particularly struck you? What has particularly resonated with you from what you've heard so far? It could be anything. It could be one particular point. It could be even something that you're wondering about in the field of leadership. Okay, but let's just take a pause because it allows the knowledge to settle a little bit. And just take a moment. We'll give you maybe 5 minutes, 8 minutes, something like that. Let's say 8 minutes so you can speak in pairs. Just someone next to you. From what you've heard so far, and we've emphasized a few key points so far, what has particularly struck you? Why has it struck you? And if at this point anything comes that you think this is something I could apply, then what would you do with it? Okay. So has anything resonated? And if something has resonated that you think you could apply in your life, what is that? Okay. We're going to give you 8 minutes to do this, and then we'll reconvene. So just find someone next to you, 8 minutes, just to have that discussion. And also for those of you online, what you can do is you can just take some time to make some notes and reflections on what you've heard so far. We'll reconvene in about 8 minutes. Thank you. So we are going to continue. And what we're going to do, and we'll do this deliberately, I just want to hear some of the things you were talking about. Because again, we're not so much concerned with just going through all of it for the sake of it. But if you really start to digest this stuff, I guarantee you'll find that you start to change the way that you deal. It's that powerful. So that's a technique. If you read here, discuss, and then start thinking, okay, what does this mean? How does this work? Like, what can I do with it? You'll find that you leave these programs, you'll find it starts to spill over into the way that you start to affect and act. Because what's happening is you're creating these impressions in your mind. So they call them samskars, right? And those impressions, as you reflect, they go deeper. And when they go deeper, for example, if we discuss things about time management and how we use time and who we associate with, you'll find that it makes you more conscious, because generally we live on autopilot, we're not conscious. So it's like, yeah, just going through the motions. And usually, if we're lucky, something will happen that jars us, that gets us to like kind of wake up. I had a very interesting experience. We had a manager based in India, really pious person. So after actually towards the end of the lockdown, right, the whole coronavirus period, he informs everyone, I'm leaving, right? He's Christian, he's Indian body, he's Christian person. He's always been into volunteering, helping other people. What happened during the lockdown? What happened during the lockdown is he had more time to think. So then he started to become conscious. Is the way I'm living, does this align with my values? If I was going to die tomorrow, which many people were thinking about because they saw people who were close to, really getting ill. So they saw some people dying. But if I was going to die tomorrow, am I happy that this is the way that I've been spending my time? And you realize, no way. And so it was just like, okay, I'm going to do something. He's now working for a charity because it aligns with his values. And that happened. And actually, it's amazing. I've seen that. That's happened to lots of people, which says a lot, because if you look at it, what it's actually saying is most people, most of us, we live our lives on autopilot. We're not reflective, right? And so just like in a company, what happens with us as devotees, they call it mission drift. You forget where you actually were going and you just end up somewhere else. And someone says, well, when you, like 10 years ago, was this where you wanted to be? No. How did you get here? I don't know how we got there. Mission drift. So what we're doing by this kind of conversation is making us more conscious. And Prabhupada says you have to become first conscious, then you can become Krishna conscious. One thing I'm going to encourage all of you to do, if you don't do this already, please put some time in your diary for thought, right? Just for reflection. You'll be surprised at the power of it in your life. There was an article, and I keep telling the managers about this, and they love it. There's an article called Beware the Busy Manager. I've mentioned it in some seminars before, and you can find it online. It's a Harvard Business Review article. And they talk about high-performing leaders. And one of the key qualities is such high-performing leaders, they regularly have time in their schedule for thinking. And what they'll do is they'll just reflect how things going. Right? How are we moving in the direction that we wanted to move in? Right? Are we going in the right direction? Are we moving off? Are we kind of veering in a completely different place? I might show you a video actually. I saw this video many years ago. This is Stanford University, is an ex-prime minister of the UK. Now, he's not popular. I'm going to give you the heads up. This prime minister is not popular, right? But I think, but to leave that to one side, I will show it to you. But it's the message, which I think he conveys really, really well on this point. And so I'll show this to you in a moment. But let's first hear from you. What were you discussing? What resonated? Any thoughts on what you could practically apply? And I do emphasize this. And that's what Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj was emphasizing a lot. You can take the philosophy, you can use it, honestly, and it will make your life, and it will transform your life. Not only will it transform your life, it will give you a greater enthusiasm for everything in Krishna consciousness. Because when you take the philosophy off the page, and when you apply it, you see it always works. And what that does, when you see that what's written on the page, when I do it, it actually makes a big difference. It increases and intensifies your shraddha, your faith. Because you heard Guru Sadhu Shastra said this, I actually did it and they were completely correct. It does make a difference. Yeah? And then that gives you more enthusiasm, more resilience, more determination for the next thing. So the Goswamis say that the scriptures, actually first it says that Shraddha, faith, means faith in the scriptures. And it says that, and the Goswamis say that, which are the 6 Goswamis, they're followers of Lord Chaitanya, they explain that when you actually connect with Shastra and you connect with it regularly, it gives you virya, which is drive or determination, right? You'll see some people like Radhanath Maharaj, others gurus, you'll see that they have so many obstacles and challenges to do whatever they want to do. But it's not the obstacles and challenges, it's that because they're so determined, they overcome all of them to get to where they need to get to. And we actually need to be like that in life. Just imagine what you could do with life if you had unbreakable determination. Seriously, think about that. No one could deter you. Whatever happens, you're so determined that whatever obstacle comes, you're going to get through it. And you know, I'm going to get through it. It's just a question of time. Right? Well, in the future, what they'll have is they'll have education systems which will teach people from a young age how to be determined. Right? And if you see, there's a whole system, I won't go into all of it, but you can also predict what will happen to a person by the qualities that they have. You know? You can predict very, very easily. The qualities that they have, the type of qualities, the mode that the qualities are in, you can predict because the qualities are more important than the karma. Good qualities will allow you to override any bad karma. But bad qualities will turn even good karma into poison. Yeah? That's the point. Anyway. What did you reflect on or discuss? Yes.
Share something. We started with this point that to be a leader means to take the person to where they want to go, and rather than just taking from them.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So to do that, to take someone to where they want to go, also means you have to, like I said, invest in yourself.
Absolutely.
Grow yourself. So it's not only that, but you also have to grow yourself in a way that models the behavior they want to be.
Okay.
So you have to take that on board as well to some extent.
Okay.
You have to be able to be the person that they want to be.
To some extent.
Yeah.
I would just add that from the Vaishnava perspective of leadership, there's a few things. One of my friends wanted to do this as a project. He had this title. He had the title in mind, which I have to be honest, I didn't like. But I won't mention the title. But the point is that you're a leader as long as you're a follower, right? This is it. You can predict how good a leader someone will be by looking at how well they can follow. It has 2 aspects. One is the characteristics. The other is the karma. Because if I'm a bad follower, then what Krishna often does is he'll bring people under me who are also bad followers, so I can learn the lesson, don't be a bad follower. So that's one side. The second is the qualities. Yeah, the qualities, as you said, the investing in oneself. Because what happens is if you keep investing in yourself, you have more to give, you see? So it actually passes through you, right? By your example, by what you say, and also by the connection to Krishna that you have as well. What I would just adjust slightly is that ultimately we want to take them where Krishna wants them to be. Yeah.
That was the third point we discussed.
Yeah.
So actually focusing on their needs rather than on their wants. not so much.
Yes.
So identifying your needs with them, and then that involves those spiritual needs. So then taking them to the place.
Fantastic. And on that point, I did find the page actually, because I'll just read this just to give you a flavor of this. I was going to put together an exercise on this because it was so interesting what I found. See, needs, so like this, let's say that someone's envious. Okay, so that envy is in the mode of ignorance, right? Then what you could do is you can figure out what's the same quality in the mode of passion, which is jealousy. So envy is, I want to take what you have. So it's destructive. You shouldn't have it, I should have it. So there's one, you've got one paneer burger, right? I want your paneer burger. No, don't, it's not lunchtime yet, people, just relax. But I want your paneer burger. So it's like, I take it, you no longer have it. That's ignorance. If it's passion, it's jealousy. You got one paneer burger, I want two. I need to make sure I have more paneer burgers than you under every circumstance, right? But the third level, so it's the same essential quality in different modes, expressed in different modes. If you express it in the mode of goodness, it's appreciation. You see? So envy is a quality of value, but in ignorance. So value in ignorance is, I see the value, but I want to take it. Passion is value in passion. I see the value, but I want to have more value than you have. I want to outperform that value. I want to overarch, or let's say, I want to have a greater level of that value. Oh, there's a one-upmanship. But in goodness, you have some value. I want to respect and appreciate it. It's the same quality. So in the similar way, when you talk about needs and wants, needs are like a legitimate human requirement. The wants are when it goes into another kind of, it goes into a lower mode. So on page 6, actually, this is page 62 of this book, but in this book, it's page 115, because I think it's bigger type. But I'll just read out this table that Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj gives. People want sympathy. They need empathy. Okay. So they want sympathy. Oh, poor you. They want empathy. I understand where you're coming from, but it's more of a connection with where you are, but in a way that empowers you. I'm trying to stand in your situation and feel where it's coming from, feel what it's like. Sympathy is, you've got your problems. I'm sorry you've got an issue. Empathy is, I want to stand with you. I want to feel what you're feeling. And it has a much more empowering effect. People want riches. Anyone seen that? Yeah, in our movement? People want riches. They need fulfillment. Can you feel the difference? Because you can have so many people, they've got lots of money and they're miserable. And you can see that they're miserable. And actually, they're also frustrated because they spend all the time and energy making the money and they're still miserable. And then they see you happy, and that's a bad look. Because it's like, you haven't got as much money as me, you have no right to be happy. Yeah. So people want riches, but they need fulfillment. So the riches is more the passion. Not that money and wealth is bad, not at all. But as a pursuit, it's better to be fulfilled than to be rich. People want fame, they need appreciation, right? So we were looking at something. It was just really interesting. There was this YouTube video, and you have all these people, and they're talking about how unhappy they were. A lot of them, these are famous people. Actually, if Bhakti Gami was here, we'd tell you the name of the video. And also there was two videos. One is like, many famous people. These are some people like from Marvel, Marvel MCU, like, the Marvel movies. I think the one guy who played Captain America in that, and so many others. And they're talking about how much they're suffering from loneliness, right? How much suffering from anxiety, right? And so many different things. And it's like, and many of them similar narrative. We thought that when we would be famous, things would go well. And in one place, this Oprah speaking to someone. There's one video, and she was complaining about how people will say negative or nasty things about you in the media. And she was speaking to someone and said that it's the same. It's just the same when you're in the workplace and someone in the workplace is telling lies about you. You feel it the same, like that. And so I found it very, very interesting, because when Russell Brand was speaking about it, he said that when he was looking for approval, he was looking for approval and I think appreciation, right? And he said it became quite demeaning. He gave an example. It was 2013. There was some award ceremony. He said that's when things really started to change, because there was a clash in him, because he created this whole persona. He used to have this whole kind of thing with his hair. Like his hair would be kind of gelled up. He said that what happened, he got that idea from seeing, there was some famous statement by someone that you should be able to recognize that person just by their silhouette. So he wanted to make his form such that you could just recognize it's him just by the outline of his form. And he said that he got into a crisis because he'd got all these things and he realized this is not working for me. I feel, and he said actually in some cases they felt more lonely, more unhappy than before they were famous, even though they thought that in the fame they'd get all this approval and attention. And I'm sharing this because one of the opportunities that Srila Prabhupada has given us, and it's a real gift, is if we can meditate on what's being given, you can start, even if it's on some level, to understand that other things will not make you happy. In one sense, in Krishna consciousness, you really do want to make it all the way through. Because if you go into the world just thinking these other things will work, you're going to be really disappointed, you know? And that's not just like, oh, well, yeah, of course they're religious, they would say that. But actually, if you hear from people who are in that space, it's a consistent message, you know? And someone else was talking about how they suffered for many years from panic attacks. And this is a famous musician, and he would be on stage and he would be suffering a panic attack and he'd push through. And he's explaining that in the video, you know? So again, this idea that whenever you find yourself wanting something, I was doing this with one devotee who was asking for advice on something. They were saying they were frustrated. And I said, okay, so that frustration, let's dig into that. What's the underlying need that's not being met? And it's an incredible technique you can use, right? So I was speaking to, what was it? I was speaking to one devotee and they were getting some bit of frustration. And what they came to realize when they dug into it, they need variety. There's a model we may show you in a future seminar, which is a very good personality model. And you can quickly understand something about yourself in this model. And then what you'll find is that if you understand something about how you're hardwired, then you can do or fulfill those needs in Krishna consciousness in a way that maximizes your inspiration, maximizes your enthusiasm. It just ticks your boxes, but it's predicated on that self-knowledge, on that self-awareness. And oftentimes that self-knowledge and that self-awareness is also predicated on good association. If you're around people who are honest, and if you yourself are open, people will tell you all kinds of things about you, which will be hugely beneficial to you. I had a 2-hour conversation this morning, 2 hours from 4 a.m. in the morning. Actually, it started at 4:05. It was because the person I was speaking to was in a different time zone. And he was brilliant. I'll be honest with you. He was brilliant. He was an Ayurvedic doctor, but he can do an analysis of you from another country. Yeah, I won't go into how, but you can I think some of you can read between the lines. He was brilliant. He was just telling me all kinds of things about myself. And I was like, wow, yeah, it was brilliant. He's a disciple of Tanao Krishnamurti. He's based in Hong Kong. I think maybe some of you know, actually, maybe you don't know him. Okay, but he's a friend of a friend. But yeah, I had a consultation with him this morning for 2 hours. Actually, it was over 2 hours. And he was just telling me, you're like this is how your nature is, this is how you're, because he's got some, let's say, abilities in that sense. And he was just very, very accurate to the point that he can tell you stuff. This is what's going on with your body. This is why it's going on. This is what you should do about it. And he's going to send me like, I've got to do a meal plan. we won't talk about that. Anyway, let's move on. So people want power. They need support and opportunity. Okay. So again, you see how it works in terms of modes. There's what people say that they want, but actually you go into the mode of goodness, you can get to the underlying need. And it's a game changer for everyone who does it. So we may do this as an exercise here, actually. I may get you to actually think, honestly, and this is just an introspective thing, where do you feel frustrated? And if you dig into it, what's the underlying unmet need? You see so many devotees in our communities like that. They're wonderful people. I mean, really wonderful people, but they lack self-awareness. And if we lack self-awareness, then this frustration, it tends to spill over into other relationships rather than stopping and saying, look, I feel frustrated. So the first thing is humility. Actually, I'm frustrated. Then it's like, okay, what is it that I'm needing? So when I was speaking to one devotee who lives abroad, actually they're coming to the UK soon, but they live abroad and they were frustrated, they wanted to move this project forward like that. And it turns out they have got all this energy and they just need a healthy outlet because they just have that kind of energy. Fine, so just find something, you can, whether it's a project you create or whatever, that allows you to channel that kind of energy because they need to see impact, they need to see something's happening. Great. find an outlet. Most people, well, many adults are not mature. We need to be mature adults. It's one thing to be physically an adult. It's another thing to be emotionally an adult. One of the qualities of emotional maturity is that I take responsibility to take care of my needs. And the symptom that we're still dealing with some child aspect is that even though I'm an adult physically, I still expect other people to take care of my needs for me, right? So you see that it's still the regression to that child state. But why aren't you looking after me and telling me how wonderful, whatever it is. So relationship is something that works best if we're both in that mature state. So we can still request something, but we know that I have the responsibility. Yeah? So that point about power, people want power, they need support and opportunity. People want domination, and that's an interesting one, isn't it? You see, people are more aggressive, but they need protection. Because if people feel protected, they don't have to be so aggressive. You've seen that sometimes. The people who are harsh and so on, it's because they feel vulnerable, right? And that's why that's what causes this kind of harsh behavior. But if they felt protected and secure, they'll just calm down. People want prestige, but they need recognition and acceptance. Right? Again, you see the pattern. It's so useful. There's so much of this in scripture, by the way. There's so many hidden models, hidden patterns. So this is just one. You see the quality, what mode is it in? Okay, what would that same quality look like in the mode of goodness? Right? What would it look like in the mode of goodness? And then in the mode of goodness, then I can work with that and I can actually get what I need and build that into my own life. Some devotees, they're frustrated because they just need some variety. They're good people, but they just feel like they got a misconception. Krishna consciousness means I've got to do it this way, I've got to do it the same way. No, but you're an individual, right? So feel free to go to Om Nom, and then the next day go to Healthy Wealthy, then the next day go to Govinda's, because I can't eat Govinda's food again. Feel free to have some variety around, right? Or we have the same class. Yeah, no, go to a different class, right? Check out different speakers. Go online, find out who else is giving a class. See, try different things. So the world is your oyster. There's so much we can do, but it's our responsibility to keep our spiritual life exciting. That's one point. No one else's responsibility. It's my responsibility. Yeah. Try maybe even associate with different devotees, right? There's so much going on online. What's it like with the Brazilian devotees when they're on the class, right? How do they? Yeah, I'm curious. Like, how do they do? Okay, time zone. All right, but we'll still make it work, whatever it is. Or check out how Krishna consciousness is practiced in different places. Go to New York and see what's happening there or whatever it is. There's so much available. Try different projects. Try different innovation. Maybe we could preach to this group. Maybe we could reach out in these circles. Maybe we could do something with the business community or the yoga community or the kirtan community or the older age group or the young age group. Maybe there's lots of interfaith stuff that we can try. Again, the whole variety is available. People want freedom. They need good guidance and facility. And the last one on this list, people want intoxication. They need altered awareness and self-actualization. Anyway, not to labor the point. You can do that as a practical exercise. Whenever you feel that something's lacking, try to dig into it, right? I feel frustrated. Why? What is the unmet need that is not, there's two dimensions to this. One is there's an unmet need that's not being fulfilled. That's one dimension. Or it's being fulfilled, but not to the degree that's required. Okay? So that can be also, when you do an analysis, you may find actually we are doing something for variety, but I need more variety, right? So it's not enough variety. Okay, so let's do that as a practice. You can write this down however you want. I'm going to give you just a few minutes. Look at your life. I want you to try and understand what do you need, and I'll give you an example in my own life. And I mentioned this. I mentioned this a few days ago, actually, on this call that we were doing some training. So I'm very much into creativity and novelty, right? One of the reasons why I like my job, we have a curriculum that we teach leadership, but I can play with it as much as I want. We can bring in additional research. We can bring in new ideas. I can change the order. So it's not that, oh, I have to give the same class the same way. And actually with the way that we train, is not speaking at the staff, because these are very experienced managers, right? But what we do is we have the curriculum to stimulate discussion. And so we're also drawing upon their best practices. What do you do in your leadership, right? Where are the challenges in your leadership? What are the key lessons you've learned as a leader in your 10, 20, 30 years as a leader, whatever it is? So it's very much a dialogue, and that keeps it interesting for me as well. So for some of us, it may be that you need novelty. So there's something about new experiences, and if you have to do the same thing, the same way, the same time every day, after a while you just feel like I'm just had enough. Like it's boring. Like it doesn't work for me. Other people, they love doing things in a routine way. So it's not one size fits all. But I want us to take some time. I want you to try and introspect a little bit, and I want you to try to understand what are some of the needs that you have. Again, as an example to really bring this up, when I was in my early years in Krishna consciousness, I'll be honest, it was fantastic, because without even being conscious of it, it ticked all my boxes, right? I was traveling around the world, so preaching and experiencing different cultures around the world. So a huge need for exploration and learning new things, tick. Great connections with other people, other young people my age, who are also in a similar direction, tick. Huge amount of connection with gurus, so I was able to learn about myself, self-awareness, right? Bhuta Bhavana, my spiritual master, Tamal Krishna Maharaj, Chandamuli Maharaj, Radhanath Maharaj, all of them, they all gave me specific things. Bhuta Bhavana, your nature is like this, so you should do this, this, and this. So it wasn't just my own introspection. I was hearing from my Shiksha gurus, and they were seeing me, and they were saying, we've seen you, we know that you've got this tendency, so you should live your spiritual life in this particular way. So I'm still drawing on the benefit from that insight to this day. Yeah. So I want you to try to understand, what do you need as a person? Okay. Whether it's novelty, whether it's, whatever it is, whether it's closeness, for some people, the social thing is more important than others, right? For some people, social thing is important, but they also need some time alone, right? Whatever it is, however it is, write down, try to introspect and write down, what are your needs? Because to the point I think that you made, Sachinanda Karuna, if you don't take care of yourself, this movement can be harsh. If you're not looking after yourself properly, and you're just expecting someone else to do it, you have another thing coming. Okay? We all have to really be able to stand on our own 2 feet psychologically in all ways, so we can be at our best to do our best. So what are my needs? And if there's any which I feel are not being fulfilled sufficiently, what can I do about it? So a little bit of a brainstorm. I'll give you 3 minutes enough to do that. Yeah, okay, write it down and then we'll reconvene. You're not gonna have to share this with anyone unless you want to, so don't feel shy about it. You can write this down, but try to understand. And another way of doing this is to think, when am I at my best? Okay, when am I at my best? When do I feel really alive in my spiritual life? What's happening? What's not happening? Okay. What are my needs? And you can tune into areas where you feel that maybe they're not quite happening, or not quite happening to the degree that you feel is needed. And I want to emphasize, not wants. I'm talking here about needs. Wants is something else, but what are my needs, right? So on the human level, these are some of the key things that I actually need to be at my best in my Krishna consciousness. Not wants, but needs, something more fundamental. So what we're going to do also, so you will have done the activity, you're looking at needs. And again, please don't underestimate the power of these things. They make a huge difference if they're done. So try to understand, and this is an ongoing thing. What do I need, right? Not what do I want? And also bear in mind that you may not get everything straight away. There's also higher forces, there's our karma, there's Krishna. There may also be some illusion. We may think I need this, and Krishna's like, no, you don't, actually. So you're not going to get that. It's not required. So whatever it is, but it's something to be conscious of. And I'm going to play this video. I mentioned before this just to really bring this point about the importance of thinking strategically, because I think this is a good video that brings it forward, independently of the popularity or lack of popularity of the person who's saying it. So what I'll do is I'll set the video up to play. I'll turn this around so you guys can watch it, and then I think they'll be able to watch this also on the virtual forum. Then we'll open up for questions, and then we'll end. Okay, but we'll carry on the discussion as we go through. If people want to get the book, So obviously you're more than welcome. It's available on Amazon. But let's go to the video and see how we go from there. So let me do share. Let's see if that, does that work? Yeah, okay, good. Good, okay, you can start this when you're ready. So I think you get the point. If we consider our life to be like that, to be a situation like a business in a sense, then we need to also think, where's it going? And just by, it's so simple, just by having some time in your diary just to reflect on how things are doing. How am I doing? Where am I going? Is this where I want to be? What can I put in place to move me in the right direction? You will see it has a huge and transformative effect. Bhakti Tirthamaj writes about this in more detail in one of the spiritual warrior books. The chapter is called The Importance of Short-Term Goals. And he makes the point that if we do not plan, Maya will plan on our behalf. So if we don't have meaningful things that we're going to engage our time and energy in, you'll find before you know it, 10 years gone. It's like, where did that go? And we won't necessarily have developed the realizations that we otherwise would have. Okay, so not to overload, let's pause here and let's just find out, do you have any questions, any comments on anything that we've said today or any of the activities or exercises? Yes.
To share some reflections. So one was talking about determination, reminded me from the Bhagavad Gita where Prabhupada speaks about the sparrow.
Yes.
And how the sparrow was really determined. The eggs went into the ocean and invoked the compassionate mercy of Garuda. That was an example. Yeah. Second was how sometimes I think like the needs that we think we have, like you mentioned just at the end, they're actually covered like wants. And sometimes they're actually so ingrained that they come from childhood. And they come from parents as well.
Definitely.
So, but
no comment.
I mean, when we really reflect, like we start to see even those. Like I look at certain things in my own life, and I think, actually, would I have done this? Should I have done this? Would I want to do? Should I? And I think that's even more difficult to see that distinction because it's so blurred because it's something that's been with you for so long. And you feel like it's you, but it's actually like, and the third one, because you mentioned Ayurveda, I had a reflection of like certain things that I wanted to eat that I didn't eat before. And I was reflecting on like, why do I want this? And then obviously in Ayurveda, it talks about different tastes and how there's a subtle connection to certain things that you're either lacking in your life or you want in your life. So that's a third thing.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, absolutely true. Absolutely. Did you want to say something?
I've got a question.
Oh, for Abhishek?
Yeah.
Okay. It's always the usual suspects, Abhishek. Haribol.
My obeisances to you and all the wonderful Vaishnavas there. I'm sorry I can't be with you in person, but if you just allow me one question.
Please, you can ask more than one question.
So I really appreciated the practical way in which you're sharing how we can really be focusing on our self-awareness. And I have a question relating to this. It's something I personally struggle with in all parts of my life. And I think, we're growing up materially and spiritually in an environment which requires permission before action, right? And sometimes, when you are on the battlefield, either at work or in teaching or whatever it might be, because we feel, if we're not as self-aware, that we require permission before taking action. Okay. So could you shed some light in how to be more self-confident and self-aware in that respect, and the focus being on self-permission?
Yeah. So it's a very good question. First of all, thank you for that. So there's a few dimensions. First of all, self-awareness can come if we reflect and if we ask. See, what happens is this. Krishna is in the heart of everyone. If you really want to know the answer to something and you want it enough to pursue it, right? So that means the desire is strong, because that means it goes beyond the mind and it goes into the world. It goes into action. If you do that and you do it consistently, you'll always get feedback. If you really want to know, what do I need to work on? You can ask devotees, and I guarantee you, if they know you well, and if they think that you're going to take it, and you're going to take it in the right way, they'll tell you the truth. You know, and what's also amazing is, if you ask a few devotees and they all say the same thing or similar, then it's like, that's a really strong sign. So sometimes if it's one or two people, it can be a misperception, but still good to know. Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj talked about that actually. It's good to know how we come across. We can actually to act accordingly. But sometimes you'll hear the same thing from everyone, right? Or virtually everyone. It's like, you wanted to know, here's the answer, right? So the self-awareness can come by the introspection. Self-awareness, interestingly enough, also comes by reading. Self-awareness comes by good association, especially when you're open. So this is 6 loving exchanges, revealing the mind and inquiring confidentially, right? So Prabhu, you've known me a long time. Between you and I, like, you know, what do you feel? What do you think I could be doing differently? So it doesn't have to be a negative thing. It's not like, where am I failing? It doesn't have to be like, it can be, what do you think I could do? Well, you know, I was thinking, Chandramuli Maharaj told me something. We were at the disappearance celebration for Bhakti Charu Maharaj earlier this year. I was in the line, and so he asked someone to come and get me. So I sat with him, and he said, Bhuta Bhavana, I've been thinking about you a lot. So I was really thinking that you should do this particular service. And he gave me a particular service. And I told him, I said, Maharaj, if that thing you told me, that's the same thing I've been hearing from so many other people as well. And then I mentioned it again, actually, on the call yesterday, because we were doing some training with a group of devotees. And it was like, yeah, that's how it is. So self-awareness can come in that way. There's other things you can do. There's actually a whole range of different techniques. If you journal, you'll become more self-aware. As long as you journal honestly, though, that's the other thing. You have to actually write down what you really feel, right? If you actually write, you know, today I'm feeling like this, or today was a good day, I did this, and this, that seemed to work, you know. I did say this to that person, this is on my mind. If you do that, if you're honest in your writing, you'll actually become self-aware. There was some research by one psychologist, and they had a technique like that where people would journal, they'd write about things, what their goals are, and they found that it reduced the people who took part. They became much more successful in school and education. Their level of anxiety and stress went down, all kinds of other benefits. So on the self-awareness side, that's one side. In terms of self-confidence, there are actually quite a few things that you can do. There's 2 elements to this. It's one thing, but there's 2 elements. If you can avoid it, stay away from emotionally damaging association. There's some association where the person, you know, gaslighting, right? They just want to make you doubt yourself, even though really you're actually doing nothing wrong, or you're saying nothing wrong. But because of their own insecurity, there's a little bit of a subtle dig, or kind of like, you know, let's find some way to minimize them. So the first part of it is the nivriti. So to the extent that you can, either minimize the negative association, or you minimize the effect of the negative association. Sometimes you can't minimize the association, so you minimize the negative effect of it. That's one side, because that's actually eroding the confidence. On the other side, you maximize two things. You maximize good association, and you maximize the effect of good association. The way to maximize the effect of good association is to replay the association in your mind. Okay, so someone's really, your spiritual master was really encouraging to you. Great. Now, every time you reflect upon the encouragement that your guru gave you, that will actually deepen the samskar, right? So it's one experience, but how much you can get from it, that's down to you actually, right? And that's why Prabhupada, his glorification of himself was that I did not deviate from the order of my spiritual master. I was always thinking about how to fulfill his instruction. You see, it's a meditation. It's not, he was with Guru Maharaj and then, you know, he was away. It's like, actually, he keeps thinking, what did Guru Maharaj say? How did Guru Maharaj tell me to do things? Why did he say that? And that meditation reinforces the effects. You can get a lot from that. So that's one way of building confidence. The other thing, which does work, by the way, it's absolutely easy to do. Because Krishna's a person, if you pray to him and say, please make me confident, he'll make you confident. Especially Prabhupada, actually. Because the acharyas are more merciful than Krishna. If you ask them, please I need to be confident. Please help me to be confident. They'll do it. Now, I should give you a warning. How they get you there, I have to be honest, how they get you there, that's down to them. Because sometimes they may put you in a situation where you're forced to draw that out of you, or you basically sink or swim. So there's a prayer, I think it's in the Christian tradition, that they ask, like, I prayed to God, please make me strong, and he gave me calamities, whatever it is. So he gives you something that as you go through that, you'll come out the other side with the qualities that you're actually requiring. Does that make some sense? Like that. But you can ask them, they'll do it. People forget, it's a sign of our impersonalism. We think that they don't exist, but they are. They're present and they're watching all the time, actually. And they can actually give all kinds of guidance, but you can pray to them for any qualities that you feel that you want to develop. Let's see what else. The actual study of scripture will also give confidence. And so that virya means drive, determination. It's also related to confidence, because also in the from the Vedic perspective, confidence, see, like, just say someone has confidence in themselves, right? That means they have faith in themselves. So it's also Shraddha. This Shraddha, that confidence that we can get there. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he elaborates on this in his commentary, Bhakti Aloka. There's a whole section on confidence, because that's actually one of the 6 principles which are favorable in Krishna consciousness, given by Rupa Goswami in the Upadeshamrita, that you should endeavor with confidence. And so it's also something that can be practiced. Let me just see, is there anything else that particularly stands out in terms of how one develops confidence? Yeah, okay. The other thing is confidence. That was it. I was going to make a post, and I was going to say that competence is confidence based upon the truth. So you're competent because you know that you know. You see the point? So then you have, so let's say you know how to cook, and you know that you know how to cook. So when it's like, we need someone to quickly make a meal. Okay, guys, leave it with me, bang, right? So we're confident in some areas, and in other areas, we may not be so confident. That's the other thing to bear in mind. So if you understand something, and you understand it deeply and well, and you've replicated that understanding in a positive way, it will give you confidence in that particular area. When I first started this job, it was not cool. I was just saying, like, all these managers, they're looking at you thinking, like, aren't you about 15? Like, why are you here? Why are you even here? Like that. And so and then it's like, uh-oh. But after a while, you do it and it's working. So it's like, okay, I can do this. Then you can play with it. So there's different stages to confidence as well. So without going into all the whole, conscious incompetence, all those terms, the point is that when you can do something, and you can repeatedly do something in such a way that you can get a healthy result, and you know that you can, then it means you have a certain general level of confidence in that area. I guess the one thing I'd say is that it's always underpinned by personal confidence. Okay, it's always underpinned by personal confidence. In Ayurveda, yeah, there's a DVD. It's actually on YouTube. Memories of Prabhupada. I used to say it was 67. It's 77. So it's Prabhupada's disciples, and in particular Kashori, that's her name. She mentions what Prabhupada said about making children confident. It's brilliant. And what she mentioned is also in Ayurveda. So you can, if you pull in Memories of Prabhupada Memories, DVD 77, you can find it. It's about 6 minutes into the video. Prabhupada says, and you can, it's so brilliant because you can understand the logic behind it. Prabhupada says that with children, when they're young, he said, you never tell the child no, right? He says, if the child's playing with something that you don't want them to play with, what you do is you distract them by giving them something else, and then you can take away the thing that you don't want to play with. And he said, if you do that, what that will do for the child, if you do that when they're young, he said, then that child, when they grow up, they'll be very confident. Yeah, and that's in Ayurveda, by the way. There's a whole section of Ayurveda about child psychology. And so what you're doing is you're creating a samskar that the child is able to achieve whatever they want. So the child wants something, and they're able to, and the mother doesn't say, no, you can't have it. Then the child has the samskar that whatever I want, I can achieve, I can gain. So that child, when they're older, the same samskar, because when they're young, the samskar is going into their unconscious. When they hit 5, then the intelligence develops, and that's like more of the conscious mind. So then to put something into their unconscious when they're older, adults, anything, or even over 5, it's harder. But when they're 5, their subconscious mind is just open, completely open. So whatever's done to them, during that period, that becomes the underlying samskars or the underlying thought patterns for the child. So a friend of mine is a disciple of Ranath Maharaj. He told me, was it this year or last year? He told me what Ranath Maharaj told him when he had his first child. Ranath Maharaj told him, he said the one thing that a child needs is unconditional love. And Ranath Maharaj told him, he said, for your child, you are God, you're their God. So whatever you do will impact upon the child. Yeah, so that's actually how the children are meant to be brought up according to Ayurveda. The unconditional love is meant to be there when their subconscious opens. So what that does is it floods the subconscious with this idea that I'm valuable, I can, whatever I want, I can achieve. And then the other things come on top of that. So then as they get older, yeah, you're also responsible, but you're a person who's valuable, who's also responsible for looking after yourself and looking after other people. You see? But it's built on you're unconditionally valuable. We've established that. Now everyone else is valuable, so you also have a responsibility to behave properly so that you don't encroach on them. I have a god sister, Mother Loka. So she's a somatic coach. So what they do is they can read, and she actually works with leaders, and she can give them feedback based on their body language, because by the body language they can actually tell things about how they lead and how they are and so on. So we were in India. We were in Chowpatty in the restaurant, and she was talking about Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, and she said something which always stuck in my mind. She said that with Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, he was very comfortable in his space, right? So this idea is taking up space, not taking up more space, right? Not encroaching. So he was comfortable in his space, but he would also inspire people to take up their space, right? So he wouldn't overstep, he wouldn't encroach on them, but also, to be honest, you could not encroach on him either, because if you did, he would actually let you know, get out of my space, basically. And that's healthy. So healthy self-esteem, I value myself, but also I respect you. And I respect your healthy boundaries. So you won't overstep the line and encroach on me, but I won't overstep the line and encroach on you either. So it's that kind of, and that's actually one of the symptoms of confidence. So there's a few levels, but there's a few things you can look at is the association, maximizing the positive, minimizing the negative, the study of the Shastra, not the reading, but the study of the Shastra. Prayers can also do it. And especially if you associate with people who are strong in a particular quality, that's a universal. Then by association with people who are strong in a particular quality, you can also develop that same quality. Yeah. Does that answer the question, Abhishek? Hope that answers.
Oh, that was a magnificent answer. Thank you so much. I think that was very clear. So thank you so much. I really appreciate the answer.
No worries. Thank you. Any other questions? Yes.
I had a question regarding this concept of needs and wants.
Yes.
Trying to fulfill the needs and wants of your followers, and also
the point of the followers is it, but it's good you ask, because there's a bit more of a clarification. There's actually, we can't draw it, but imagine two circles, right? And there's an overlap in the middle. So on the one side, it's people's needs. You as a leader, your job is not to fulfill all their needs. You're meant to fulfill their needs within the remit of your responsibility. Okay, so the first circle is because everything that they need, let's say that they need children, that's not your responsibility, right? So their needs, and then your responsibility, and then the overlap is, so that as part of your responsibility, there's a certain subsection of needs that they have that you're meant to be responsible for. Okay, not all their needs, but those needs which relate to your responsibility.
And so if they expect something more than that's your responsibility, and they're really hoping that this is something you could help them with, how do you draw the line, and how do you explain it to them nicely? Yeah.
So when we were discussing yesterday, we did this trust seminar, and I shared these 7 actually, 6 from my spiritual master. There was one that I added. And in the seminar that my Guru Maharaj gave on building trust, he began with clarify expectations. Because if I have an expectation of you that you can't fulfill, and I don't tell you, and then I'm going to be frustrated with you when you don't fulfill it, and it's not your fault, because I never told you that I'm expecting that, and we never had a conversation. So in good leadership, one of the first things that we can do is let's have a conversation. What are you expecting of me as a manager? Right? This is like, oh, you're expecting that? I can do that. No, I can't really do this. I'm just telling you up front. How do you feel about that? Maybe this need can be fulfilled in another way, but because of my limitations, because of my capacity, I can do this. that this is something that's going to be outside of my remit. And if we have that conversation first, there's another, I'm working on something on leadership, but one of the things, I won't go into all the details, but one of the points on this is that the tone you set at the beginning of your leadership is more important than what the tone you set later on, right? So there's a signature that you can see through the scriptures, a mode of goodness. It's always, you make the investment now and you draw the benefit later. So what you put in at the beginning of a relationship or beginning of leadership, let's have a conversation. I was telling this person we should get in leadership, they were doing some projects and get to know everyone, right? And not just get to know them, get them to know each other. Because what happens is, and I call it, this is my own phrase, I call it the preemptive strike. A good leader, they anticipate the things that can go wrong and they put things in place at the beginning to minimize things that can go wrong later on. So for example, it's very easy to see that in many teams, there can be a conflict, right? How do you mitigate against the conflict? When the team first come together, you spend more time with the team bonding, team understanding each other, because if I understand you, I'm less likely to take anything that you do the wrong way. You see the point? So rather than avoiding this, then there's a conflict later on, and then you're going to, because you're the leader, you're going to spend your time and energy having to fix it. Otherwise, we'll curse you as a leader. But what could have been done ahead of time is actually, we know people disagree. So we've got a new team. Let's do some team bonding, team building. Let's get to know each other. This is your personality type. Fantastic. What causes you to feel at your best? What really kind of upsets you with people? Great. So I know you get really upset if people are lacking in punctuality. Great. I know from day one before anything's happened, right? And then vice versa. So you can the wise leader, they put certain things in place to mitigate against issues before they arise. At work, we were speaking to one manager, and he was sent to Hong Kong. I think it was Hong Kong or Singapore. There was some aspect of the business which was failing, and they sent him in to kind of just like basically save the whole thing. It's like, worth a lot of money. And he was being interviewed. I was there. Yeah, he was being interviewed. I was at the back, but he talked about, they call it silent runners. What he did, he said when he came, because he's a manager of managers, so he had to come in and then help the other managers. He said that he rewarded the managers who rarely had any issues, right? So he calls them silent runners, because if your manager's really thoughtful, they put things in place so the issues don't arise in the first place. That's the mode of goodness. Mode of passion is the issues keep coming up, but he keeps saving or she keeps saving the day, right? That's the mode of passion. It's second-class leadership, but in a society where people are more in the mode of passion, they'll recognize that, right? Oh my God, something was failing and he jumped in and saved it. But they won't necessarily see, well, how come this person, there's never an emergency? That's because his leadership's actually superior. It's actually superior leadership if you don't have lots of issues than if you have loads of issues, but you keep fixing it. You see the point? So it's actually a superior quality of management and you can see that when you study it, because they preempt. That's why I call it the preemptive strike. You think, what could go wrong? Okay, team could have a conflict. They may have a misunderstanding. Okay, what do I do to mitigate against that happening in the first place? Rules of contract. So, okay, we're a team. From time to time, we'll disagree. So what's the contract about how we disagree, right? So we haven't disagreed yet because there's no emotional, there's no negative emotional wounds. There's no kind of, bad blood, right? But we know that from time to time we can disagree. So let's discuss this now when there's no disagreement. What should be the rules of conduct about how we get along with each other? And when there's a disagreement, what's the rules that we decide about how we address issues, right? And people think, oh, it's fluffy. No, it's not fluffy. That will save you a lot of trouble, right? I'll be transparent. There are many companies, they're investing more in leadership now because the young people, and it's a good thing, the young people won't tolerate the stuff that the older generation tolerated in leadership. Mm-hmm. The older generation is like, yeah, we want the money. So the leader's bad, they're terrible, they don't know how to lead, but we just need the money. The younger generation's like, I had enough of this. And when they leave, they will go on social media and they'll rip that company to shreds. And the company is scared of losing good talent. So they're investing in leadership because they know if we invest in leadership, we can attract talented individuals. And even more importantly, we can maintain them, we can retain them. Otherwise, you spend lots of time, energy, money in building expertise in this person, not just money and expertise. They've got the relationships. And in business, you know how valuable that is. They've got all the relationships. People trust that client trusts him. So when he leaves the company, the client's like, whoa, so John's not there anymore. It's okay, John's left, but we're sending someone else. I don't know. Which company is John working for again? Maybe we can continue with John in the new company that he's now working for. And that's how people poach clients. And these clients can be worth millions. Yep. So he's got the relationship. That means people trust him. They know him. And to build a new relationship with from scratch with some person that you've got no background on, you don't know whether they're going to be any good, you don't know whether they're going to be responsive, he's a complete stranger. A lot of people, they're not going to do it. So yeah. So it's about having the conversation up front.
And then the point you're making about preempting what to find out what could go wrong. And if we had to extrapolate it to sort of spiritual mentoring, there may not be a particular thing that I'm trying to judge, and perhaps maybe I'm not that intuitive or not able to tell exactly what might go wrong.
Okay, so I'll just help, because I've seen loads of things go wrong in spiritual mentoring. So there's no problem. So there's loads of, it's actually very similar. So I gave this seminar yesterday, so I'll try and make the recording available, because we talked about trust in relation to mentoring like for devotees. It's not the UK. There's another group of devotees. They're still in their early stages, so some training for them. So loads of things can go wrong. I've seen it. What happens in ISKCON is if you're my mentor, I'm just assuming you're going to do all kinds of things for me, and there's no conversation. And worse, if I don't think that you're approachable, I won't tell you what I'm expecting. You see, part of the role of a mentor is to be approachable, because if you're approachable, then I'm more likely to say, you know what, I was really expecting this and you didn't do it, and like that, I was a bit upset. If I think that you're too scary or fierce, then I won't tell you, but I'll still be upset and disappointed. So I'm going to tell everyone else. My mentor didn't bother to do this. It was my birthday, no card, nothing. It's like, well, did you tell her that you expected that? No, but she should know, because it's like, we're devotees. It's like, well, that's your idea of a devotee mentor. That's what I would do. Yeah. Yeah, that's what you would do, but she's not you. So again, you can do things which are about establishing the communication. It's so simple. I'll give you a very simple example. You start mentoring someone, you can say, look, sometimes there'll be expectations that you have, which I may not know about. I really, if there's anything that you expect, please let me know, and if something comes to mind a little bit later on, I'm always happy to hear from you. Yeah, because it's actually, from the scriptural point of view, whoever's senior has a bit more responsibility to help the junior to feel at ease. But you don't tell the junior that. That's for you. For the junior, what you tell them is your responsibility to let me know what you're expecting. You see, because then what happens is if both people feel responsible, you have maximized the chance of things working. But if you don't say anything, because you've been around longer, Krishna will hold you more responsible. Because like, okay, you've been around longer, so you should be thinking like, what needs, because they're junior to you. That's why you're mentoring them. You see the point? So you're meant to think on behalf of the people that you're looking after. Not that you take all your capacity to do that, because you have other things on, but you have also, because you're looking after them, part of it is that also, what would they need, right? What could go wrong? Okay, let's have a conversation. What's the frequency that you expect us to meet, right? Because if that mentor's expecting you to spontaneously call them once a week, because that's what their idea of mentoring is, if you haven't had that conversation and they don't hear from you, they'll think that you're neglecting them. But as far as you're concerned, but if they want to speak to me, why don't they just call me, right? But they're thinking, but you're my mentor, you're meant to call me. We didn't discuss that. Right? So it can be as simple as having a conversation. What works for you, right? I tell my mentees, I'm happy to speak to you whenever you want. But because I've got so many mentees, all I need is I require you to call me, right? If you message me and say, BBT, can we catch up? I'll always be there. But I say it from day one. And if that works for you, great. If it doesn't, I completely understand. But this is my limitation. This is my capacity, And I don't want to set you up for disappointment. So I'm putting the cards on the table right now. Yeah, like that. That works. And then the other thing, you get the sense. So it's really a conversation. What are you expecting? What would frustrate you from a mentor? Oh, it'd frustrate you if this happens. I have a tendency to do this, right? So I'm just saying it's not that I do it on purpose, just because sometimes there's emergencies, so I have to look after this or that, and that's why sometimes last minute I do have to cancel. Would that be a cause of disturbance for you? You know, what we do in training is you tell people what's going to happen before it happens. And so if I say this is going to happen and then it happens, then what happened? Then the expectation, which I've told you is going to be like this, then matches a reality. Every time in your relationship between you and another person, every time you set an expectation and then the reality matches it, you build trust. And trust is lost whenever there's one expectation and then the reality is somewhere falling short. Yeah. Now, of course, you can build even more trust when you set the expectation like this and you exceed it. That also builds trust. Yeah. So it's about that. And if something is coming up and let's say they're expecting to meet and you can't, if you tell them early, it shows respect. I know we're due to meet next week. I've just found out that there's a bit of an emergency on at work. It's going to be all hands on deck. So unfortunately, I can't do next week. But because you told them early, they have time. It shows respect. Okay, it's not the last minute. It's not that I've carved out my schedule to speak to you and then you didn't turn up. And I was like, I could have gone to visit a friend. They said they wanted to speak to me. You promised me you'd be available, and then you cancelled at the last minute. So I can't speak to you now. And because I thought I was going to speak to you, I told my friend that I can't come, and now they've gone somewhere else. I've missed out on both sides. But no, you knew, and you told me at the time. Okay, so I could rearrange my schedule. I can use my time in a different way. But the principle, you can keep it very simple. The principle is have the conversation about expectations and share what you expect of them. How does that sound to you? Does it work? You know, and if it doesn't work, you have to make people feel at ease. We had a guest over for dinner a few years ago, and he was in charge of one particular organization. And he was saying, if people don't want to give money because they have an issue with me as a leader, they should just tell me. And I was just looking and thinking, no one's going to tell you anything. Mm-hmm. Because the way you're speaking, everyone's going to be like, whoa, he can't, this thing. So he's saying verbally, if people have an issue, they should tell me. But the whole body language, which is greater communication, is that I cannot take that kind of honest feedback. So no one tells them anything. You understand? So it's, again, the approachability as well. Yeah, and then that way it's a fluid relationship. Anyway, that's a whole seminar in itself. But even small things that you can do, even when you're being open about yourself, because you're the mentor, if you're open, they're more likely to be open as well. If you're like, yeah, you know, I remember having that struggle when I first started Christian consciousness. It was just a headache, and I didn't really trust the devotees because I thought they're a bit weird, whatever it is, you know. But you're honest about it, then that person's like, you know what? Yeah, you know, to be honest, I also think they're a bit weird too, you know, like, whatever it is. You get the point, because you're modeling the behavior that you want to see. But I can get you that recording from the seminar yesterday. Yes. You can
in terms of approachability, does it have to be in terms of quantity and time, or just the fact that they can actually open up regardless? Because sometimes they expect maybe 1 hour every day, or
yeah. So you set the expectations at the beginning. Yeah, because it shouldn't be. See, this is my Guru Maharaj used to say: wherever there's ambiguity, there's Maya. Right. So you left it grey. So therefore, everyone thought I'm going to call her up whenever I need something. And some people, they need something around the clock, right? And it's just not going to work for you, right? So don't leave it grey. You're responsible to say, look, this is what I can do. You know, does that work for you? You know, like that. Yeah. So have that conversation early.
Equating that to being approachable, it doesn't make you less approachable.
No. Approachability is something different. Approachability is when they start to open up, you don't shoot them down. You say, you know what? I really appreciate the fact that you felt comfortable saying that, you know, and I'm really glad because I want to help. Okay. And then you actually mean it. If you say it and you mean it and they're sincere, they can pick up. It's not a technique. I'm telling you, these things are not a technique. The difference between a technique and this is that this, you actually, it's coming from the heart. You actually genuinely mean this. Yeah. But if it's like, I don't really want to look after them, it's disgusting mentees. But, you know, I went to a seminar and Guru Maharaj said, I've got to do it. So I'm going to use this technique. So then they can pick that up. People can pick up. I was looking at this for research. There's something called biophotons. What you think about a person also has an effect upon them, even at a distance. Yeah. It's a thing. Anyway, that's the whole side. But so yeah, so your intention is a big part of it. You can help people grow just by your intention. If your intention is strong, you genuinely have a genuine interest in that person, it will affect them in some way, whether you know it or not. Especially if they're sincere and open to that positivity. It will, just by your intention, you can actually help someone to actually grow. If your intention is strong, there's a whole science behind it. But clarifying the expectations, and when they be approached, how are you? Be genuinely happy to see them. Again, subtle thing. It's in the body language. You can't actually cheat. You can't trick it. If you actually want, so don't take on anyone that you don't want to mentor. That's the other thing. If you're not happy to mentor them, don't say yes. Only take on the people you actually want to mentor. You're actually happy to mentor. Then there's no kind of issue. Then it's like, wow, great to see you. And your body language will spontaneously be like you are actually happy to see those people. Like that. And then they'll pick it up and be like, oh, she's actually happy to see me. And then the rapport will be like that. And if you can't speak to them for some reason, it's good if you can explain why. I'd love to talk to you. So my grandma did that. You start the compassion up front. I really would love to speak to you. This is going on, unfortunately. So can we change it? Otherwise, like, I can't talk now. It's got a different feel, right? So the first thing you've done is, I don't want to talk to you, right? There may have been a good reason, but you led with the negative. Right? Whereas you could do the same thing by, I'm really glad to see you. I would love to spend time with you. Unfortunately, this has come up, but let's put something else in the schedule because I really want to hear what you have to say. You see the difference? That way you're still showing that you're still open, you're still approachable. And they know, they don't think, oh, she's just saying that, because you've given them a reason why you're not going to speak to them. Right? So it's not like, is she just saying that? But no, she actually said this has happened and that's why I can't actually do it. Again, if there's a vacuum, if you don't explain, and if you can explain and you don't, then that it leaves room for people to think, she just said she can't talk right now. Is that really the case? Yeah. And if it keeps happening, that's when it really creates the doubt, Yeah. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Okay, so should we stop here? Okay, Prashant's ready. Okay, so I hope that was also useful for those who joined on Zoom, and yeah, we will continue. What you can do for me, all of you, is you can let me know as we dive into what would you prefer. I can do summaries of the chapters if that's easier. We can do reading if that's easier. There's pros and cons in both sides, but if we're trying to serve you guys, what would work for you? Because there's a lot there, to be honest. It can be quite dense. But I'm into dense, but it's a question of what's best for you. Or you can go ahead and think about it and let me know if you have any views. Yeah. Okay. So we'll stop there. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna. Please carry on. I was mentioning that what?
You were mentioning that we can look at people's behavior and then try and understand what is the need behind it, and then that will solve the behavior. And you said that, for example, if someone is looking for fame, they might need, if I remember correctly, you said appreciation.
That's from the Leadership 2 book. So it's on page 62 of this copy, and there's a table where Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj gives them what people want and what they need. Yes, so we did mention that. So
my question is, what if you have a situation where you're dealing with an individual where, say, they want, it's
you're cutting out, Sharadia. So you're dealing with an individual and
want to be kind of like the center of, be in the limelight. So I suppose that's fame. Hare Krishna, can you hear me?
Yes, but the line's a little bit. The line was cutting out a little bit. So if you repeat the question, so if you have someone who wants to be the center of attention.
Yes, you've got someone that wants to be the center of attention. They want to be in the limelight. So I'm assuming that they're wanting fame, and what they need is appreciation. But my question is, what if you have an individual who acts like that, and then when you try and give them appreciation, they won't really accept it, and it's almost like you kind of get this feeling that it's a never ending well. Like, even if you give them, they want more, and what you try to give them, it's also not really taken on. So it's not just like, because sometimes people have like there's a need or emotional need, but other times it seems that you're actually dealing with a person where it's beyond just a need, but it's almost like a mental imbalance. So how do you deal with such an individual then?
That's a good question. Hold on, let me just meditate on this. Yeah, there's a few factors here. One is, it depends on the relationship, actually. If you have a relationship with a person, you may need to help them to explore why they act the way that they do and what's behind it. If there's that relationship. If it doesn't, if they continue to be like that and they're off balance, they will cause their own, what's the word I'm looking for? They will be the cause of their own situation which will force them to look at that issue. Because if they're imbalanced, you're talking about passion and ignorance. And passion and ignorance will lead to it will cause people to act in a certain way, which will cause some difficulty in their own life. So if they continually like that, that will happen. Another reason why it will cause some issues, because if it's a never-ending desire for attention, then what will happen in the end is that it implies that they're not fulfilled even when they get the attention. Which also means that they're gonna at some point have to face the fact that what they're looking for is not what they're really looking for, because it's not making them happy. Yeah. So I think that would be another factor. But if you have the relationship, have the conversation, directly or indirectly, you can actually just say to them, so I've noticed that this tends to happen, you know, like, what are your thoughts on that, you know, or can I give you some feedback? It came across like this. No, just leaving that with you. It's up to you what you do with that. But it came across in this particular way when we were in this particular situation. So that's another way you can do it. You can always pray for them, right? Whatever the situation, whoever they are, whatever they're doing, you can always pray that they're able to improve. That's another thing you can do. And you can always be a role model yourself, because people who are too demanding of attention, after a while, people will just want to stay away from them. Yeah. So that will also teach them something. I hope was that in some way useful?
Hare Krishna Prabhu, yes, I think it was very useful. I think I definitely want to reflect on what you said. I don't know if this is wrong, because I get to a point, you know, with such individuals where I just don't want to engage with them anymore.
Not you, and I'm wondering, like, others will feel the same way.
Yes, I suppose. But now my question is, because it's related to, you were saying that, you know, when someone is like emotionally draining, then we can also dissociate from that person. But how do we know, like, this is example, like I find this person like very draining because they always want attention, and then when you try and give them attention, they're not satisfied either, because then, you know, they say that it's not, the intention's not clear. So is that like, how do you know when you need to stay because it's a lesson you need to learn? Like, I need to learn to be more tolerant, I need to be more unconditional, or when is, okay, no, I need to dissociate myself from them? How do we know when is the lesson to move away, and when is the lesson, you know, develop a quality which we lack?
Yeah, so the way this works is there are 6 principles of surrender. The first is to accept what's favorable and to reject what's unfavorable. So what happens is, in a situation, you first try to do your best. If you find that you're not able to help the situation to improve, then you have a choice. If the situation is neutral to you, right, so you couldn't improve it, but it's not draining you, then you can choose to stay or leave. But if the situation is negative and you're trying to improve, and you can't improve the situation, and it's bringing you down, and you don't need to be there, then you leave. Now, in terms of learning, whether it's a lesson I need to learn or not, you don't need to worry about that. You should act via the spiritual intelligence. And then what Krishna will do is, if it's a lesson that you need to learn, then you will go elsewhere and you will meet the same kind of challenge again. And when it's the same challenge again and again, that will be the sign that actually this is not about them so much. It's that there's a specific quality that I need to develop in response to this kind of situation, right? Because Krishna is there. If he wants you to learn something, it doesn't matter where you go on this planet, the lesson will follow you until you learn it,